Hello, and welcome to the Nile webinar series. Today, we have Renée Falanga-Brenner joining us, and she is going to be presenting on understanding the special education process. I'm very pleased to have Renée join us. She and I have known each other for many years, and she is wonderful. So this should be a very informative webinar. Just some quick housekeeping. The chat feature is disabled for this webinar, and instead, if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A box, and Renée will leave time at the end to answer any and all questions. Oftentimes, when people have questions, they do get answered throughout the webinar. We do have both interpreters and captions available for anyone who needs that accommodation. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Renée as soon as I share the PowerPoint screen.
So I guess I have a question. If anybody needs the captioning, do they have to let you know that now? Because I don't see it.
I believe the captioning is turned on. Crystal, can you just confirm for me?
Captions are turned on. Everyone will have to turn it on individually using the CC button at the bottom toolbar.
Okay, good. Thank you for sharing that.
All right, thank you, and we'll turn this over to Renée.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to learn some very important information regarding understanding the special education process. A little bit about myself. I have 4 children. My oldest daughter, Serena, is 31 and totally dependent. And this was just a portion of my background in understanding the special education process. As I've helped her to be educated through early intervention, preschool special education, and then school age education, I've also supported her inclusion within the community as well as within her own family and stuff like that. I am an ambassador for the Ulster County Think Differently initiative, as well as a member of the Special Education Task Force for the Mid-Hudson Valley. I do serve on a number of other committees, but most importantly, I am a mom to 4 children that are all adults now. So if you have any questions, do put it in the Q&A, and I hope that you learned something new today. Okay, we can move on, yes. So what is a disability? And usually parents seek early intervention and supports for their children when they are diagnosed with a disability. In my case, it was, actually it wasn't at birth, it was 4 months later. But it's a functional limitation that interferes with a person's ability to move independently, to speak, hear, see, and learn. So some of the common special needs of children, and again, we're focusing on children here, because maybe of the diagnosed disability, or it's just something that's separate. These are some of the common special needs. Asthma, allergies. We've seen a really huge increase in allergies, whether it be food related, such as a peanut allergy, gluten, allergies to bee stings, to other things like poison ivy. Believe it or not, that you can have an allergy even though you get it. It could be severe. Developmental or behavioral problems. That's definitely an uptick since COVID. I've seen that as a special education advocate. Motor impairments or musculoskeletal disabilities, seizure disorders, multiple congenital abnormalities, cancer, and again, I've seen that increase with a number of children being diagnosed with cancer, and sensory needs, and that's a huge one. Oh, I'm sorry. Can we go back one? My bad. So I did want to share with you, anytime you have a child that has any of these kind of special needs, it's really important to come up with an individualized health care and emergency plan, routine plan. So for any of these special needs, it's important that you have something written out that lists all of these things and what to do, what not to do, who to contact, etc. And also have a plan A or B if something happens. So for example, if your child has asthma and they are in need of a breathing treatment, it's important to let it be known what it looks like and what kind of a breathing treatment. It could be an inhaler where it's located, or it could be an actual breathing treatment where they need a nebulizer. If it's an allergy, obviously, it would be if it's something that topically has to be applied, or an EpiPen is needed, or they can't be around that particular thing they're allergic to. Again, I won't go through all of these, but it's really important to be specific as to the protocol of what to do and to create an individualized health plan and emergency care. I just got lost. Hold on. There we go. So thank you. We can go to the next slide. I thank you. So this is the boring part, the federal laws. So it was in a long time ago that the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was passed that allowed, it's a federal law, so all the states have to adhere to it. And this federal law gave access and entitlement to persons, individuals with disabilities education, which is really important. The first part of the law, which is part C, which makes no sense because B comes before C. The first part C is early intervention. That's all about 0 to 3. And the part B is for students that are age 3, which is preschool, to ages 21. And this entitles children covered by Part B to a free, appropriate public education in that child's, and that's called FAPE, the acronym, in that child's least restrictive environment, their LRE. And I just want to point out that the least restrictive environment can be different for everyone. It's the environment in which that child is able to actually learn. The Americans with Disability Act, another federal law, was passed in 1990, and this protects all persons with disabilities from discrimination at work, school, or community living. And that is really important to remember. So the community living is recreation when you think about that, in addition to other places, stores, meaning supermarkets, your Walmart, your Targets, restaurants, places like that. Then in 2015, it was renamed the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, from the No Child Left Behind Act that was previous to that. And I kind of laughed because I felt like every child sometimes gets left behind, that let's put it towards a positive thing, that what can we do to help every child succeed? So the ESSA was signed in 2015, which mandated higher standards for quality of instruction, student achievement, school accountability, and transparency. So children are therefore entitled to attend a school that meets state and federal standards for student achievement. So something to share about with all of you is that ESSA requires every state to measure performance in reading, math, and science. Each state individually has their way of assessing this information, and they must inform parents about the standards and the results. So this information can be found on the New York State Education website underneath your local school district. So for example, if you've noticed your child's not really succeeding and you go to the website and you see the reporting for your school district and it's really, really low, it's failing, let's say that, but you notice your neighboring school district or one of the neighboring school districts is doing really well, you have the right to send your child to a different placement because of that. And what's important to note is that you're going to need that information to justify why you want your child sent to a different public school. So that's just something to just share. And then the last one here, which is funny because I actually got asked this question yesterday. I think a lot of parents forget this, is FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So you have the right to inspect and review your students' records, your child's records that are maintained by schools and check for current inaccuracies and anything else that doesn't need to be there. And also to see what they've recorded. I'm sorry, my video seems to go in and out. So one of the things about this too is that it also is that you have a right to look at everything in the special education section of the school district department, as well as individual schools. So if your child attended different elementary schools, there might be records just based at that school and not in a set location in the school district, like the central office. It's up to you to ask if all the records are obtainable at the central office and be specific. So I had a parent ask that they wanted to see just what we were talking about, their child's 3rd and 4th grade reading and math assessments that the state did. And I shared with them that it's important to write a letter asking for the specific things they're looking for, because then the district can determine where that's located. You might have to pay a fee for copies. You can find that out from them. But it's important to know that you're able to do that. A number of parents have done that and noticed that there was information on the records that had nothing to do or was inaccurate with that student. So every once in a while, it's a good thing to look at that if you have a chance, an opportunity. Okay, thanks, Suzanne. We're ready for the next slide. So I must be moving something because every time I turn my page, every state, like I said, has to adhere to the federal laws. And New York State has their state law called New York State Education Article 89. And this is the special education laws that are derived from the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And from this, in addition to this, New York State has the regulations of the Commissioner of Education, which is the Part 200 regulations, which explains all this special education stuff that we're kind of sort of talking about. And then Part 201 is the procedural safeguards, what your rights are and the responsibilities of the district. So I am going to share my screen now to, hold on, let me see if I can do this, to share with you the Part 200s. And I don't know if I can do that. Now, how do I do that?
At the bottom of your screen, you should see a green up arrow that says.
Yep. And here we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is the Part 200s, and I'm not where you can find this here. So what I want to tell you is that it's a lot. That's all I'm going to say. So in this section, it has all the definitions, Board of Ed responsibilities, and what's important to note is I'm just going to move down here. This section talks about preschool students with disabilities. And this here is really important because it talks about impartial hearing officers. If you don't agree with stuff that's going on, that you can do that. And let me see if I can get to this here. I'm just trying to get. So there was Article 89, like I talked about, and this is this is more so about kids that are living in a childcare institutions, residentials. Here's the Part 200s. So this is the complete Part 200s right here. Oh, I keep going backwards. I apologize. But I wanted to show you Part 201. And this is the regulations right here. And it's going to keep doing that. This is the one thing that I found that was difficult navigating. They keep sending me back to everything. Hold on one second. So this part, I'm not going to click this on, but this is essentially all the stuff that pertains to your procedural safeguards, what the responsibility for the CSE committee is, as far as functional behavioral assessments and other stuff. And then in addition to that, you could have expedited evaluations, procedures for suspensions and removal of students, authority of impartial hearing officer to change a placement, the coordination of superintendent's hearing with other due process procedures, provision of services during suspensions. This is very important. And expedited due process hearings. So all of these things are really important for you to have bookmarked and look at for when you have something that you're concerned about and want to make a change to. All right, so I'm going to stop my screen sharing. Do I get to do that or no? Do I just turn that off? Or do you share now, Suzanne? Thank you, everyone, for being so understanding and patient. Oh, you did it good. I get excited about these here. So that's like, that's reading. That's interesting reading for when you really, if you need to fall asleep, maybe. But it's interesting because when I took all this training back in the day, I'm also a graduate of the Partners in Policymaking from the year 2001. And we used to have the Part 200 regulations. They used to give it out. We used to print it out. We used to give it out, highlighted everything. And I used to bring that to meetings when I was advocating. But there's a lot of information in there. And I will share with you that many times a lot of chairpersons in school districts don't really understand that to the capacity that they should, because training is not mandated. It's suggested to take CSE training and to understand all of this. So if there's any chairpersons that are on here right now, kudos to you, because it's a lot of information to know. But if you know where to find it, that's the most important thing. So I can't stress that early intervention is important. If you suspect that your child is not developing like other children, it's really important that you share that with people who can help you to understand if that's the case or not. You can, besides a pediatrician, there's teachers, caregivers, or others, and share that your child's having difficulty maybe in a learning environment, or you notice developmentally they're not doing, and what your maybe other children have done, or children that you see in a peer or social environment or group. I remember a lot of times young parents take their, well, not young parents, but they take their children to maybe a story hour or to the park or to a religious event such as Sunday school, things like that, or birthday parties, and they notice their child is not quite developing or doing the same things that their peers are. Your child might have school avoidance and they don't want to go to school or something like that. Or your child does have a diagnosed disability. So any of these things you want to keep your eye out for things that are like that, and share that information with your pediatrician. So how to get services if you suspect this. First of all, I share that it's really important to talk with your pediatrician and to stress it. So most times when you take your child to the doctor for an appointment, they ask you a lot of questions. And one of them is, you know, do you understand what your child's saying? And most parents can say yes, right? Because it's your child. The next thing to share with them is, but you know what? No one else understands what my child's saying. Or, you know, is your child walking or crawling or doing all this stuff? And you might not realize that your child should be doing that. That's why it's important to look at those developmental milestones and to keep track of it, like those old books that we used to list when your child took the first step or first crawl or ate solid food. That's really important to share. And if you find that your child really is delayed developmentally, if your child's 0 to 3, you do a written referral to the county early intervention department of the county that you reside in. So you can look that up on the website for the county that you live in. If your child is ages 3 to 5, again, everything you want to keep written, I will probably say it 100 times during this training. It's important to have a paper trail. So to make sure that you have documentation that you wrote a letter requesting and referring your child to the Committee on Preschool Special Education in the school district that you reside in, where you live. And you need to have proof of residency for that too. And usually it's a utility bill or something like that. There are sample letters in a thing that I will be showing you later. And then finally, if you want to make a referral to for your child, if your child's kindergarten ages 5 or that to ages 18 to 21, that is referred to the Committee on Special Education in the district that you reside in as well. It is so important that you sign a consent agreeing to any evaluations that are going to be done for your child. And once you sign that consent, the 60-day timeline begins. And that's why I suggest that you hand deliver that request for referral to the committees, requesting that your child be evaluated and have it stamped with the date so that you have a copy of that and they know that you have a copy of that. And then that timeline begins. Referrals can be made by parents or guardians, teachers, physicians, administrators, or anyone else who knows the child. And most times it's best that the parent does it. And there's and now the special education in plain language. Let me see if I can do this now. You see it? I don't see it. That's not it. All right, hold on a second. Can we go back to the screen? Let me see if I can click it on. It will come on.
You won't be able to click it on the screen.
Okay, hold on one second then. Okay. Think I'm going to do this. Hold on. Here we go.
You need to push the green
Yep,
share.
I got it. All right, so this is if you download anything and make copies of it. And again, this was something that was created by the New York State Special Education Task Force, and it was revised in 2014. It kind of needs another revision, but this here is a wealth. Here's a table of contents of information, your rights, all sorts of different things. But at the very end, please don't pay attention to some of this. Some of this stuff isn't correct anymore. That's why I say some of it needs to be updated. But what I want to share with you is at the very end of here, it talks about your due process rights. If you have a complaint, what to do. The Office of Civil Rights is another place, and 504 accommodations, all this other stuff. But at the end, it gives you, bear with me, I'm getting there. Sample letters. Here we go. I should have had that page numbered. I should put that right on there. What page is that? 50. I'm learning too. Only done this a million times. So this is really important when you're requesting special education services. So this is like a sample letter. So if it was early intervention, you title it, you're requesting early intervention, and then you fill in, this here would be the name of the early intervention director for the county, etc., or the school district for committee on preschool, or the school district committee on special education. And then these are all sorts of sample letters. There's another sample letter here for certain things. You want to see the educational records. Remember, I talked about FERPA. If you want to request it, here's a sample letter. And be specific. This is a guideline. It's always important to your John Hancock in addition to a date. Don't ever forget to date it. Trust me on that. Other things for reevaluation. And this here is for an independent educational evaluation, which we'll talk about. And a team meeting that you want to have, because you can have it at any time. Prior written notice, all sorts of things. And I'm not going to share anymore. So I'm going to go back and unshare. So how do I unshare my screen? So that's a really important thing to download and to have. So I'm glad that we were able to show all of you that, because that was so important. Thank you, Suzanne. You're doing a great job helping me out. I appreciate it. So early intervention 0 to 3, part C. It builds upon and provides supports and resources to assist family members. So any family member that's caring for a child 0 to 3, and caregivers. So your child can be 0 to 3 and in a daycare setting, or early Head Start, or that wonderful thing, the Head Start programs, to enhance the child's learning and development. And that, again, reaching those developmental milestones through everyday learning opportunities, which is so important. It's designed to meet the developmental needs of each eligible child. And again, they want the parents to be there, or the caregivers. Somebody needs to be there. It's not like a one-on-one session. It's designed, like I said, to meet the needs of the family related to enhancing that child's development. Services and supports selected in collaboration with the parents. So you can help to choose what kind of services that your child will get, such as speech therapy, special education itinerant services, where a special education teacher comes out and meets with you and your child, or at the daycare center with maybe the teacher or another caregiver there. Physical therapy, occupational therapy. I think I said speech already. They are provided under public supervision by qualified personnel that oversees this plan, called the service coordinator. So that service coordinator that the county has oversees this program and helps assist you with your understanding of it and any concerns you might have. And then an IFSP, an Individualized Family Service Plan, is created and followed by all the people who are working with your child. And it should be shared with anyone working with your child. So for example, it's important, if your child attends a daycare program or a Head Start program, early Head Start, that you share this here, because in order for children to develop and to succeed, they need that consistency. So if they're getting individualized therapies, and the therapists are working with your child to do things a certain way, obviously you want that carried over into the daycare setting, so they know how to do certain things with your child. And then your child will hopefully eventually develop and meet those milestones. So that's why it's important that it's a big collaboration with everybody that has anything to do with your child. It's important to be transparent. So next is the meeting. So of course we love meetings, don't we? So once this is decided that your child's eligible for early intervention services, they have that initial meeting where they create this IFSP, but it involves team members. So it's the early intervention official, the EIO of that county, where you live. Remember, like I said, that the evaluators who did the assessment or evaluation on your child, the providers, the therapists who deliver the service to your child and family, if your child's already in the program, your service coordinator, who you really want there, you, parent, caregiver, guardian, should be there, and anyone else that you think is important to be at that meeting. And I give examples because remember, if your child is with you, but also in a daycare or Head Start or somewhere else, it's important to have that person there because they can give a broader insight to your child's development and to share information that might be of importance to making decisions at that meeting. So a DSS worker that might be working with a child, a mental health provider, I didn't put that on there, that's the et cetera part. But I think it's important if your child is seeing a therapist, it's important to include that person. An advocate such as myself to make sure that and I think sometimes parents feel comfortable having an advocate there because I know pretty much what the rules and regulations are, and I kind of think outside the box if something can't happen. A physician, I share this about a physician because sometimes people, the team members might not fully understand the complexities of your child's diagnosis. And it's important from them to hear it from the person that did the diagnosis. I think we all kind of agree with that, you know, when the parent says it, but if the doctor says it. So my backdoor, out of the box way of getting that physician to attend a meeting is to make sure you let the early interventional official know that you would like to invite your child's physician. So it could be the neurologist, it could be a cardiologist, it could be a pulmonologist, it could be any specialized, even the pediatrician that you want there. And what you try to do is to see if the physician can schedule a telehealth appointment. That's usually what, 15 minutes, and give a window as to when they're available. And then you share that with the EIO. Again, not everybody does this here. So if it's something that's needed, and I've had many kids that needed this kind of a meeting with the physician there, it can't hurt to ask. You have a 50-50 chance of it happening. You don't ask, you have 0 chance. If it can happen, always have, again, the physician's write-up of their evaluation of the child and their assessment and their recommendations, and you share it with everybody before the meeting, and you also have that in your person. I think I want to stop here for a second, Suzanne, to see if anybody has any questions now, because this was a lot. I saw one question, I think.
There was only one question, and it was asking if we're putting questions here or in the chat. And so the answer to that is yes, questions are going in the chat.
Okay, so I'll give a sec.
The Q&A box.
Yeah, it's right here. If you can't see it, I'm hovering over it. I don't know if you can see my screen. But I think I'll give a minute in case anybody has a question, because I don't want to, I know it takes a while to type. Does that sound good? Trying to think of anything else with this here, because I really thought it was important to talk about all the different people you could have at the meeting. I do know, and I will share it with you all, that sometimes some of the providers are not able to attend the meetings, meaning the therapists, because there's such a lack of providers now. I think we're seeing that across the state. And so if they come to so many meetings, they're not able to provide those services for the kids that need it. So what should happen is they should give a progress report that could be shared at the meeting. If that makes any sense to all of you, which I think it does, and any recommendations as well. All right, I don't see any questions. Good, we'll move on. So the purpose of special education so when your child, if they were in early intervention, will transition from early intervention to preschool special education. Just a reminder, early intervention is a county program. Preschool special education is a school district. So there's that transition. So it's very important that parents whose kids are in EI and transitioning to CPSE, that you take care of all the necessary work that needs to happen. Try to start at 6 months before your child turns age 3. It's very important because you've got to get all your ducks in a row. So when the day your child turns 3 and is discharged from early intervention, unless something else has taken place, that there's a program for him or her. And I say that because there's been times where children have slipped through the cracks and all of a sudden they turn 3, early intervention ended, and there's no program, and there wasn't that transition. Your service coordinator should be helping you with that and will have you sign any necessary paperwork to make sure any new evaluations might need to be done. There was something in a fly or something. Any new evaluations need to be done, or anything else that needs to be signed so your child can be evaluated for preschool special education. So Part B of this here is for students ages 3 to 21 for free appropriate public education in the child's least restrictive environment. So special education is specifically designed instruction, SDI. It includes related services like we discussed, OT, PT, speech. There's others, feeding therapy, vision therapy, assistive technology, adapted phys ed. There could be supplementary aids or services that your child is able to have, such as a one-on-one nurse or, like I said, assistive technology. Provide modifications to a student's education that allows them to reach their full potential, just as students who are typically in general education, which is really important. Did I mention maybe vision therapy? That's another one that was there. So that's why it's important. So the types of evaluations that are done when your child transitions from early intervention to preschool special education are the cognitive, multidisciplinary, it could be physical, gross and fine motor, so OT and PT, communication, both expressive and receptive. So is your child able to say what he or she wants or needs or is feeling? Are they able to understand what other people are asking of them and what to do? Social emotional evaluation. How is your child's emotional needs met? Are they able to express it? How do they react or interact with their peers and other people? Because it can be adults too. Their adaptive needs. Do they need certain equipment or are they able to adapt to their environments? The other piece to this here that I want to stress is for the occupational therapy evaluation, if your child has sensory needs or sometimes has sensory overload, it's really important that you share that because the occupational therapist can do what is called a sensory profile on your child, and that is very important to obtaining any kind of sensory supports for your child when being educated, or so everybody can understand that. The evaluations and determination of eligibility must be completed within 60 calendar days after the receipt of the signed consent. So remember I told you that you're going to get that dated, so you have 60 days. And the evaluations should also identify your child's present levels of performance, what they can do right at that moment when the evaluation took place, and then a map, what is called the management, academic, and physical and social needs of your child. Now, I put on here what a functional behavioral assessment, because I think sometimes people don't understand that if your child has been having a lot of different kinds of behavior in the classroom, and I know that many parents call me up and tell me that their daycare provider, preschool, Head Start, school age or whatever, call up and they say that their child's behavior is impeding their ability to learn, or it's impeding the ability of other kids to learn. They want you to pick your kid up all the time. The school district is required, you can ask, to do a functional behavioral assessment. And this is something that's not done as often as it should be. And it's a sad thing. So you can request for this to be done. And when it is done, a behaviorist comes in and observes your child and figures out those behaviors, what's going on beforehand, what happens during it, what happens afterwards, and comes up with this report. And then from that report, a behavior intervention plan is created, again, with the help of the team, with people that are working with that child, including the parent. And so some of the things when a behaviorist comes in can recognize maybe it's those sensory things that really impedes that child's behavior. That I'm looking up, it could be the fluorescent lights. It could be the level of sound in the classroom. It could be the manner in which the child is asked to do something, the tone of voice. It could be a sound that's outside, or things that they're saying. It could be that this child has certain triggers. It could be that it's the same time every morning, and it could be because the child's just hungry or tired and they need those kind of supports. So again, if you keep getting phone calls regarding your child's behavior, you can always say, hey, has a functional behavioral assessment ever been done? Because it sounds like this might work for my kid, and to come up with a behavior intervention plan. We can go to the next slide. Next slide. Okay, so the CPSC or the CSC meetings, the Committee on Preschool Special Education, the Committee on School Age Education, it's the responsibility for these committees and these meetings to determine the eligibility and have an annual review or a program review once eligibility is determined. You should receive an invitation to this meeting 5 school calendar days before the scheduled date. So if there's a holiday, let's use Labor Day as an example, that doesn't count as a school calendar day, that's days off. What's important to note is that if the meeting needs to happen sooner than 5 school calendar days, which has happened before, you will get a prior written notice letter to sign that you agree to have that meeting sooner than 5 school calendar days. So please make sure you sign that, because they won't be able to do anything. My other thing is, if you know that there's going to be a meeting and 5 school calendar days is not enough time for you, because how many of you work, you can let the director know, or the administrative assistant, with an email. Remember, everything is in paper trail, right? An email stating, hey, not hey, dear Renee, I appreciate the fact that we're going to have a meeting for my daughter. However, I work, and is there any chance that you can let me know when the meeting will happen so I can get the time off from work? Or I'm able to tell you I'm not available that day because of prior commitments. Again, 50-50 chance of that happening. You could not only email, but give a phone call. When you communicate your needs, it's important to do that. But if you wait until the meeting is scheduled and then say that doesn't work for me, it's a little more difficult to have it rescheduled. Always reply in writing that you will be there, and who else you would like to be invited to. So again, once you get that invitation, You could email and let them know, yes, I will be there at the meeting. I'm inviting X, Y, and Z. And we'll talk more about who X, Y, and Z can be. I suggest, and I think it should be mandatory, I'm wondering if Suzanne and anybody else agrees with me, the meeting should always be recorded. Ask for it to be recorded. It's not recorded unless you ask, again in writing, and not the day before. Should be when you respond to the meeting letter, that you would appreciate the meeting to be recorded, and just let them know you'll record it as well. The reason I say that is because it's difficult to listen to what's going on and interpret everything when it's going on, write notes down. And sometimes everyone that you want at that meeting might not be able to be there. So if there's a significant other or a caregiver that can't be there, they can always listen to it. And then also it's for accountability. And there have been many times where people interpreted things differently or assumed things were said and it might have not been said, or vice versa. So it's just a good thing to do. Before the meeting, you should have any of those evaluations we talked about on the last slide beforehand. So you have an opportunity to discuss those evaluations with the person that did the evaluation and ask any of those questions then. The same with progress reports and anything else beforehand. This serves two purposes: that the person who did it might not be able to be at that meeting, and so you can get those questions answered, because if you wait until the meeting and that person's not there, usually the chairperson will say, well, we really can't ask because, or maybe somebody else can interpret it, which would be good, but it's better to have the person that did it there. The other reason is because I think it saves time at the meeting. If we review, and I've seen this happen, all these evaluations at the meeting, and they give a half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour for the meeting, and they take so much time discussing the evaluations and progress reports, there's might not be enough time to actually create, if found eligible, or if you're reviewing annually, to create a new IEP for your child. And that's the meat and potatoes of that meeting. And I've seen many times that there's like 10 minutes left of the meeting and everybody's rushing, and that's the part we don't want to rush through. So if you can avoid that, and as an advocate, I will suggest, hey, if we don't need to read all these evaluations, if we could just cut to the summary because it's already been read and discussed beforehand, let's try to do that so we can get to the important part. Not that the evaluations are important, but if you take care of it beforehand, we can focus on the meat and potatoes. Yeah, that's that for that. So the role of the Committee on Preschool Special Education, the Committee on School Age Education, is to identify and determine eligibility, develop and review that IEP, identify the child's presence levels of performance, develop appropriate annual goals. And I say appropriate, the goals that your child will be able to obtain within that year, not within 15 years. I know I sound a little sarcastic, but that year. And then determine the level of participation with non-disabled peers in the least restrictive environment. And that might mean including modifications or accommodations. So the reason I say that is because if a child is determined that if a child has a mental, physical, or emotional limitation that impedes that child's ability to learn and to access general education and benefit from it. So that's usually something that they say that they need to be in a separate thing. But that doesn't mean that your child might not be able to join their peers and other things that happen throughout the day with their non-disabled peers. But if that's the case, it's really important to share what supports they might need for that to happen. So for example, many times kids are in a segregated classroom, was that you or me? I don't know who that was. Is in a segregated classroom, maybe in elementary school or school age, not school age, middle school or high school, but they can participate in maybe music or the library or phys ed or something like that. However, do they need supports in that classroom? So for example, a music teacher might have, and again, music, think of music, it's a lot of sensory. So if that child is in there, do they need noise canceling headphones, but they can still participate, but they might need that? Or they need an aide to go in there or somebody to help because that child might need redirection. Or do that, and always, all those teachers should have access to the IEP to have a better understanding of what your child needs and what supports are needed. And then once the IEP is created and it gets forwarded to the Board of Education, and most Board of Eds meet twice a month during the school year. Maybe once, it depends on the size of the school district, but and they just have a list of numbers. Your child's IEP becomes a number, and it's usually, okay, these are the IEPs that need approving. It's all of them at one lump sum. The concern I have with that is that members of the Board of Ed should know what services and programs the children that are receiving special education services are getting. And I say that in respect to the fact that if they have 20 kids that they're sending out of the school district to get services, a program, wouldn't it be better for that school district to see if there's a place to have a program like that within the district and to start working on that for the future? That's why I think it's important that, so I plug when it's time for Board of Ed elections to see how many people are running that have any child with a disability or an IEP or a 504, to make sure you have somebody on there that can maybe investigate that kind of stuff. That's just my plug from 31 years of doing this here. All right, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So the members of the CPSE, the Committee on Preschool Special Education, the parents of the student, or guardians of the student with a disability, the chairperson, school district can be the school district representative, a representative from the municipality, so the county that your child lives in. Again, this is that transition, if they're transitioning from EI to preschool, a representative from EI, if they're transitioning, a regular ed teacher, and hopefully it might be someone your child knows, but again, if it's new, they wouldn't know, a special education educator or provider, an individual who can interpret all these evaluations. And like I said, go over them beforehand. Some of these people serve a dual purpose. So if the chairperson might be able to interpret those evaluations, so they will do that. But the parent can't be the person. Others who have special, have knowledge or special expertise about your child. And so again, that might be what we're talking about at the bottom. A child care provider, a therapist, your child's physician, if their child has a nurse, an advocate, a DSS worker, like I said, if they attend Sunday school, any kind of religious thing, if they've attended any sports programs or camps, any person that can give insight into how your child is with their peers or around other people, or have that expertise about your child. Your parents, a family member. I remember years ago, there was a kid and all the family members came and the room wasn't big enough because there was like 16, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, family members that wanted to come. And it was a family that was just so excited that there was going to be some support for their child and their family members. So it was a really good thing. So those people can be invited. Okay, next slide. DSE members are CSE members are almost the same as CPSE, but a little bit different. The parents of the student, obviously, chairperson, again, district representative, a regular ed teacher, and if this isn't the first CSE meeting for your kid, it's usually a teacher that knows your kid. A special education educator or provider, again, same deal. If your child's already been through this and this is just a meeting, an annual, someone your child knows. If not, you would want these people to be a regular ed teacher or a special ed teacher that teaches the child, the age group that your child's in. So if your child's in kindergarten, first or second grade, you want somebody that age. I think you see where I'm going with that. The school psychologist, that's very important to have that person there. A parent member. So a parent member is a parent of a child with a disability that resides in your school district within, I believe, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, like my kids have graduated, so within 3 years of graduation. So if my kids graduated age 21, because they can if they have an IEP, till age, 3 years after they graduated. But that parent member is not an advocate. That parent member takes a training, the Board of Ed approves the parent member, and they are the person that has been there, done that, and is kind of like a bit of moral support for you. And that is a person that you can have there, like you can say, hey, is this typical of, what happens at this school or whatever, to ask those questions. Again, others who have knowledge or expertise about your child, we talked about that. The parent or the district can invite that person. So it could be a child care provider, the therapist, your child's physician and advocate, like I said, a DSS worker. I also want to include, and you might want to write this in, your child's one-on-one aide if they have one, your child's nurse. And the reason why I say that, if your child is already, this is an annual meeting and your child has a one-on-one aide or a nurse, that person is with your child most of the time. And personally speaking, because my oldest had a one-on-one nurse, she was able to share information of questions that might have been brought up at that meeting that can be answered right then and there, that we have no idea somebody might ask. 9 times out of 10, the district chairperson will say, well, we asked the aide for their input, or we asked the nurse to write something up previous, but that's not as good as having a person there. And part of the problem is finding someone to substitute for your child and be with your child if you're at the meeting and your child's not. So there's 2 ways of doing that. They have to get a substitute, or the child can be brought to the meeting if you think that's necessary. Again, it's your choice to make. So I did have my daughter when she was older, so they didn't have to find a nurse, or they knew that the other people in the classroom knew that if something happened, they knew where to find the nurse, that they could get her right away. So again, if you do this well ahead of the meeting date and plan it, it can happen. The school district's physician. So I don't know if you know that each school district has a physician. I know here, in Ulster County, many of the districts in Ulster County have the same school physician. And you can ask for the school physician to be there as well as the school district, but it needs to be 72 hours prior. And again, paper trail, a written notice that you want that person there for the very reason we talked about having your physician there, that there might be something that the other members of the committee are not quite understanding about medical things about your child. And I have had the school physician and the child's physician on at the same time, because sometimes the school physician needs to hear. Usually the school physician will reach out to the parents, the child's physician beforehand. They should. Or read the notes, or call them if they have questions. But again, we're talking about cases where a child might have some serious medical things, and everyone needs to be on the same page and understand it. And again, the meeting's recorded, right? That's the other thing you want to make sure, so everyone hears it. The student, if appropriate, always if appropriate. And I usually have students fill out, if they're able to, a self-advocating sheet. So they can do that. So some students feel comfortable attending the meeting at the beginning of the meeting, sharing what they liked about the previous year, what things worked, what things didn't work. People get to talk with them, they introduce themselves, and they can leave if they want to, or they can stay. Again, if it's appropriate. There are times that I've had students who literally shared stuff that was very important for the rest of the committee to understand what that student's goals were. I had a student that came to a meeting and said they won't go to school unless they can go to band. And that was a huge thing. Just remember in the back of your head, equal access. So what happened was that, well, we're still at the page before, I'm sorry. Yeah, so what happened was with this particular student was after the student left, one of the other members of the committee said, well, that can't happen because resource room is at the same time as band. And I, as the advocate, said, well, then we need to think outside the box to make that band happen for that student. Because if that is the gift and the talent and the strength that that child has, and that's their reason they want to come to school, we have to allow that student equal access like other kids. And it could be band, it could be choir, it could be a sport, it could be whatever. That's the law. So they did. They thought outside the box, jumped forward to when that student graduated. That student went to college for music and became part of the music industry. Just have to share that because, again, if that child didn't speak up for himself, that wouldn't have happened. And then again, the last member is the individual that can interpret those evaluations. And again, it could be one of the other people on there. But again, all those evaluations you get beforehand. Okay, thank you. Now, next slide. At the meeting, it's really important to sit where you're comfortable. If it's virtual, it's important to okay. If it's sit where you're comfortable. I always make sure if it's an in-person meeting that there's tissues on the table. If virtual, make sure you're somewhere where there's little background noise or distraction. I remember when we went virtual at the beginning and I was working from home, you know, it's important that people know that and they're not walking behind me. Make sure all the people are there. And I know you might not think it's your job, but as the parent, it's important to make sure that everybody's at that meeting before it begins. And if the meeting's being recorded, to make sure that it's being recorded to remind everybody. Remember to have all your child's stuff in front of you, whether it be virtual or in person, because it looks like you're prepared. If you come empty-handed, it's not as effective. And I just say that in the most respectful way. Just please have that stuff in front of you. It's important to do that. The next page, yep. Introductions are done. Like I said, you know, they go around. They should do that. If they forget to do that, please do that. Sometimes everybody assumes everybody knows each other, especially if you're recording. It's important that everybody say who they are. Parents and guardians are asked why they wanted the meeting. That usually is the first thing if it's a program review. You know, can you want to share, do an update, share about your child? Other persons at the meeting will ask for their input as well. Again, those evaluations are going to be read, etc. Eligibility will be determined. And usually the chairperson usually takes the lead on that, but also should be asking the thoughts on everyone else, whether the child should be found eligible to receive an IEP. Once that's agreed upon, a classification will be determined, and we'll get to that. Then that IEP will be created. And remember, I said that's the meat and the potatoes, so you want to leave time for that. And then the start date of when that IEP will be started will be discussed and put on there. Once more, I got to remind you that the start date can't happen until the Board of Ed approves it first. So that's important. So you are an expert about your child, but you're not the only person that knows about your child, because there are other people in different environments that work with your child and see your child. So many times parents are like, you know, Johnny never did that for me at home. Why is he doing it for you in school? And again, it's a different environment. His peers are all doing it. Again, that's why, but you get to bring in all that stuff that you know about your child. And I've heard parents say all the time, oh, trust me, do not put broccoli in front of my kid. They will not eat it. They'll throw it across the table. I'm using that as a funny example. But so it's important for you to be prepared to share your child's abilities and their limitations. Share your child's strengths, share their talents, share all that wonderfulness of your child, but then also say what their limits are and what support you believe they need. Their educational needs, how the educational progress that you want to know about, any concerns that you have about your child. And you want to do this in a really respectful manner. And I say that because you get more with sugar than you do salt. I've seen it many times. It's not a good thing to say, you know, my neighbor's kid has the same diagnosis as mine. I know I'm supposed to get all this for my kid. I just need to remind everybody, it's an IEP, an Individualized Education Plan, and it's for an individual. There's so much about other children that you're not aware of that are brought up, and that's why kids get different things. If we or our argument is perceived as a threat, we will never be heard. So going into the meeting with the guns loaded, and I'm not that advocate, by the way, so don't call me if you want. I'm assertive, but I'm not aggressive. You won't be heard because because we're human. We're going to put a defense mode up. So again, it's a collaboration and we want to work that. That's not saying that if you're not heard and you've discussed things and it's not happening, that there are not protocols to take. And like I shared with the special education plain language, there's, you know, what you could do to follow up with that. So I don't want to continue with that, but I want you to also remember not to blame or criticize. Stick to the facts. Sticking to the facts, and here's a big thing I want to share with everyone. When your child comes home and tells you this, please don't assume that's exactly what happened, because your child can also go to the school and tell them things about what happened at home. And you don't want the school assuming that that's truth either. What you say is that, you know, my child came home from school and this is what they told me happened. I just want to clarify this. What happened? Can you share this? So don't accuse, see the difference by saying that? So do that. And it should be the same way in reverse. So if the teacher calls you up and say, you know, Johnny came to school and this is what Johnny said happened at home. That's important to do that. You want to seek solutions to problems. Compromise. You don't want to make things worse. Recognize your own experience as a parent. That's really important. Research your child's disability if you have an or medical diagnosis, so you're knowledgeable about it. The internet's a very wonderful tool, but be mindful that sometimes there's information out there that's not correct. So to know that. Again, like I said before, review all the evaluations, the previous FSP or IEP, so you have everything set. Is that good? So why a classification? This is one of the biggest questions that parents ask. So if your child is a preschool student, ages 3 to 5, all preschool students are classified as a preschooler with a disability, a PWD. But the specific medical diagnosis your child has can be shared at the meeting. So that's important to do. The regulations require that Part 200 regulations that we showed at the beginning, requires a classification for children 5 to 21 years old who receive special education. Again, an IEP, children receive special education, specialized instruction by a qualified special education instructor. Classifications are descriptors of your child's area of need. They are not a description of who your child is, and that's really important. They do not also determine what services your child will be receiving. The CSE team, and you're one of the members of the team, determines that. And I hope that makes sense. So if you're confused about any of this, you can go ahead and look at the classification, the Part 200s. So the 13 classifications are the next, and you can look the definitions of this up. They're located in the Special Education in Plain Language, as well as the Part 200 regulations. So these are the 13 classifications: autism, other health impairment. Other health impairment, usually if a child is diagnosed and determined to have ADD or ADHD, other health impairment is sometimes that. Sometimes children who are autistic can also be classified under other health impairment. Speech and language impairment, deafness, orthopedic impairment, traumatic brain injury, and a traumatic brain injury is after the child is born, not an at birth brain damage like my child was. So it's afterwards. Deaf blindness, multiple disabilities. So my daughter was multiply disabled because she had a number of these different disabilities. Visual impairment, emotional disability, and that got changed from emotional disturbance. I don't even know how disturbance came out of, why that was even one of the classifications, but it's emotional disability. A learning disability, and that's a very broad term. So we'll talk more a little bit about that. Hearing impairment or an intellectual disability. And intellectual disability was changed from MR, a mental retardation. So that's another good thing that was done. So all those definitions you can find elsewhere. So in addition to figuring the classification, now we got to figure out, okay, what classroom setting is my child going to be able to learn in? So the least restrictive is where all the kids are, gen ed kids, is your general ed classroom setting. So if your child can be in a general ed classroom setting, they might have a consultant special, I should make sure I should have put consultant special education teacher. I apologize for not having that there. A consultant special education teacher services. That could be direct, meaning direct with your child in the classroom, or maybe they pull them out for some reason. Or indirect, they work with the classroom teacher. Your child can have resource room where they are, and it's usually older kids for this, not the elementary school years, where they go and they get a set number of minutes per day or hours per week that they are working on their goals on their IEP and stuff there. Or they also they can get related services, which is OT, PT, speech, physical therapy, you know, the gamut on that. Then one question that I always make sure that I want parents to ask is that always ask how many kids could potentially be in that classroom, that gen ed classroom. That's very important to note. So for example, most times, you know, the school districts will say, well, we don't know next year's prediction, which they might not, but you can say, but what has been the, every year, what has been the number of kids in the kindergarten class or the first grade class? What could be the highest number? Because that's really important if your child doesn't learn well in a big environment. Because then that also might determine what supports need to go in that gen ed environment in order for your child to learn in that environment. So always ask number of kids. And number of adults. That's another important thing. So the integrated co-teach class is you have a gen ed teacher and a special education teacher. are both in that classroom. In addition to all the related services can be in there as well. Then if that's not your child's least restricted environment, they're not able to learn in that, then the special education self-contained classroom. So the first number is the number of kids in the classroom. The second number is the teacher, special ed teacher, and the third number is the assistant or the aide. And again, there might be more kids in that classroom because school districts can ask for a variance of one more kid. So always ask how many, what's the potential, even though it's 6, it could be 7. And also the number of adults, because even in those classrooms, that another student might have a one-on-one aide, which means there's another adult. So that means that your child might have, there's more attention. If you have 6 kids and 4 adults in the classroom, that's a good ratio when you think about it. Then there's home. Well, let's go to approved private school settings first. So there's approved private school settings. So those are your special ed, New York State special ed schools that are approved by New York State Special Ed. So there are many of the BOCES programs, ARC programs. It's very hard for me to remember all the names across the state. So it's the list of New York State approved private segregated schools are on the website on the state ed thing that I showed you at the beginning that are approved. School for the deaf, there's school for the blind, there's all these different places to look into. There's also home or hospital instruction. So that's not home schooling, just so you know. Home instruction or hospital instruction is when your child cannot be educated in the environment with other children, because right now I have a lot of kids on home instruction because there's no program available for them and they cannot be in the school district. They don't have the supports that child needs to do that. So until they find a district placement and not a district private placement for them, they get home instruction where a special education teacher has to come in either into the house or go to the library or some kind of community place where they can be taught. The hospital instruction is also for kids that might have medical frailties or a psychiatric school, psychiatric hospital where they need to be, and they still need to be required to have education. And then finally, if none of that's working and your child's not able to learn, there's New York State approved residential in-state programs where the whole point of a residential setting is that students getting wraparound services. So during the day, they're in an educational program that are focusing on helping to educate that child. And then the residents that they stay at overnight, they're still getting those supports. So things are done so they're consistent and routine, and they're built into their day where there's no break, where they're doing something different at home than they are at school. And it's very confusing. And I'll share with you that there's a lot of students who have emotional needs that are in placements like this, as well as students who are autistic, depending on the level of autism. So those are really important. And then obviously everything still gets related services. So I'm going to stop for a second, and I think I'm going to try to answer some of these questions before we finish.
There's several questions. So the first question is, what can a parent do if their child has a shunt? Everyone sees this as a liability.
Okay, so just so you know that everyone can see the person's name. I know when you were recording, we should have said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if your child has a shunt and you want your child to be educated with their peers, and again, I'm not a professional, but I am, because my daughter has a suction machine, needed to be fed by a tube, is totally dependent. She had a one-on-one nurse. That sounds like an extremely good reason to have a one-on-one nurse. But that one-on-one nurse needs to be trained for the shunt. It's like a child that might have a trach, right? or a child that's fed by a G tube. My daughter was bolus, but there's also that continuous feed. You should speak to your child's specialist that did the shunt and ask what things would need to be in place. This is definitely something that would take some time and also education and training, and not just for a one-on-one nurse, because you're going to need a backup nurse, but whatever school that child goes to, they have a school nurse. They should get the training as well. Every single child is a liability. End of discussion. And that just makes me feel sad to even see that, because any child can have an injury or have something happen at school is a liability. Am I right? So, so that's what you would do. And you would come up with that healthcare plan, like I had talked about at the beginning. And again, you want to collaborate with all the people involved and make sure that everybody is comfortable for that to happen. So all the things that you need to think about too is transportation, right? All those things need to be on there. So if I didn't fully answer that, at the end, if there's time, we'll talk about it then. The next questions.
Many schools have been shying away from IEPs and pushing the use of 504s. Can you explain why this is and what advocates can do for a child that should be eligible for an IEP?
Okay, so I've seen this. You all know I've seen this here too. So my big thing is documentation, facts from years before. And I just literally did this here. That student that I was talking about, they wanted this 3rd and 4th grade records for the state assessments. A 504 is not federally funded like we shared. A 504 is and we'll talk about 504, is not the same as an IEP. An IEP provides specialized learning instruction. So, for example, if your child is in need of a special education teacher to be overseeing that, making sure everything is getting done, that's something that you want to push for. I oftentimes look at the report cards, and this is why. When you look in the report cards and the student might be doing well, average, but all the comments section is that, Susie needs redirection. Susie needs to be given breaks. Susie this, that. If there's so much support that student needs, there's just so much support a 504 plan can give. And what you want to do is to make sure that the gap in your child's educational learning is not big. And you need to make sure you have that documentation for lack of a better word, to provide evidence to prove that, to justify that. Some schools do the 504 because they themselves might feel they don't need an IEP because the classrooms in that school are already built to support that student. And I'll be honest with you, I've seen a few schools that have that already. So they switch to the 504, but that doesn't mean that you can't go back. Just so you know, yeah, it may take a little longer, but I'm just saying that nothing is set in stone. So again, have all that, your evidence and your justification in front of you. The next, again, I'll talk more of that if needs be. We're going to talk more about 504. If a parent or teacher fears retaliation from the district, what steps can they take? So, and I guess I want to be more specific about retaliation. So I've had parents share that they're worried if they really push, like let's just use that, pushing the IEP instead of a 504, and they have other kids that are in that school, that they might take it out on their kids. I think that's what you're thinking of. Keep a record of it. I'm going to bring this up. I don't remember if it's on here or not, but it's important to note. There's such a thing called the DASA, the Dignity for All Students Act. And unfortunately, I think a lot of schools on the website, it's very hard to find it right away. But if you think that you are being bullied or treated unfairly, you can fill that DASA out and just say that you feel that not being treated appropriately, or your child's not being treated appropriately, and an investigation will be done. And then that can be taken up with, again, going through procedural safeguards and due process and taking it up and making a formal complaint about that. That can definitely be done. But I think mediation is a really good thing, and transparency, and to be able to say, let's just say it's the principal, hey, listen, I just want to talk honestly with you. I feel as if yada, yada, yada. Can we discuss this as adults? Because I have my child's best interest, and I just want to make sure that they're getting the education that they're supposed to be getting according to the law. Again, you can't request the Harvard of education when the law says that you get the community college. That's pretty much the fact, and the state ed regulations, show that. But your child should have equal access to what other kids have in general ed, so that's why it's important. I hope I answered that. If not, we'll talk at the end. And then what if the school tells a parent not to contact a classroom teacher and only to talk to the CSE chair? That is a huge, wonderful question. And I don't know how much information that's backing that up, but I'll play devil's advocate. On the IEP, when you create the IEP, one important component to the IEP is, I always say, how is communication going to be handled with the parent? How would you like it? So it's a discussion between the parent and the providers. So it could be the teacher and the therapist. Back in the day, I had a book, a home book, or whatever you want to call it, a school to home book for my daughter, because she's nonverbal. I wrote a letter at the very beginning of it and told everyone who worked individually with my daughter, again, only with her, they could take 2 minutes out of their time to write in the book and let me know what they did with her, how she tolerated it, what I could do at home. I wrote to them what happened. So they had a conversation with her and vice versa. She came home. If the teacher had an opportunity to write in it, or her nurse, because her nurse could write in it, or the 101 aide, whoever he wants, to give permission, have it written on the IEP. If it's a text, if it's a weekly email, and always, if it's something that's major importance, that should be done right away, and it should be an email. But not to contact the classroom teacher, that's not appropriate, because that's your child's teacher. I'm playing devil's advocate, and again, I don't know the situation. There are so many parents that inundate teachers that they can't even do their job with all sorts of questions. So that's why it needs to be limited. And it could be that you need to, I would find out why. And here's the other part. Ask if there's a guideline or a rule book or procedures where it literally states that you're not allowed to do that. So they can show you physical evidence that, no, we don't allow this in our school. That's always something to ask. Like, if they say they can't do this, to just turn around and say, oh, can you show me where it says that in the rule books, the school handbook? I'm sorry, couldn't think of it. The handbook where it says we can't do this. Always ask that in a nice way. So I hope I answered your question. Let's move on. So the IEP is going to have all this stuff like we talked about, present levels of performance, that disability classification, and that's something to think about beforehand. Measurable annual goals, and measurable, you ask, well, how is it going to be measured? Who's doing the measuring? And then you're going to get progress reports too. So that's important to remember. Special education program and services, frequency, duration, location, ratio. So that one slide where it lists all those different things, they're going to come up with what kind of classroom setting, what kind of related services, how long is the related services going to be, where is this place going to be, the ratio of everything, all that'll be on there. Then they will list any testing accommodations, any modifications, anything else that needs to go on there. How is your child going to participate with in-district, district-wide assessments and New York State assessments? How is that going to happen? And then how an explanation of how your child's not going to be able to participate in a gen ed class or a physical ed class, because then they can offer adaptive phys ed. I just want to share that measurable annual goals are really important, because you want to understand what the instruction is going to look like for your child if they have, goals that are geared towards specific education goals. They need to be academic and functional. That's really important to remember. If your child's academically succeeding, but are they functionally succeeding in that classroom? Are they able to do the work without any assistance? And that's, somebody had asked a question about switching from a IEP to a 504. Yeah, are they functionally able to do it without any assistance? Because if they can't, think about that, having that IEP. And so your child might need any assistant technology devices. Again, remember to ask about class size. Supports for school personnel, remember we talked about that, or even training for parents, that should be on there as well. And I think, did I talk more about that? Nope. I just talked about ratio, projected date for the initiation of the programs, and then any accommodations. Hold on one second. Oh yeah, so accommodations, and we have one right here right now, American Sign Language, that there are ways that a child might not be able to hear or see, and they might need different ways of getting the material to them. So that's all alternate modes of access, whether it be auditory, multisensory, tactile, and visual. It could be large print, magnification, sign language, braille, tape recording, books on tape, notes, outlines, visual cues. All of those things are important. How is your student going to accomplish and utilize these accommodations? Who's going to be responsible for making sure they're done? My eyes are going like that because that's a lot of the majority of the phone calls I get. They're not following my kids' accommodations. I have students that have their IEP with them, and they're right away they whip it out and they're like, I'm supposed to get this, which is good. But it usually is the special ed teacher who is that coordinator of the services that should be making sure. And as a parent, you hear that your child's saying this isn't happening. Remember what I said, the thing, Johnny shared with me and told me that he's not getting this accommodation. The book is not being read to him, or whatever it is. Remember how to approach it. Don't accuse them, but share what your child said to them and get clarification. So we're going to switch to the next one. So a description of how progress will be measured. How often will you be getting progress notes? It's good to ask that. Transportation, huge thing. The moment your child steps on the bus is the beginning of the school day. So all those people who help with transportation, beginning, and then when they step off the bus at the end of the day, should be part of some kind of team and transparency and education and having a relationship with your child and you as the parent or guardian. So that needs to be listed, and all the things that you need for transportation. And that could be a specialized car seat or seat belt, or a one-on-one aid, a person to sit next, or they need to sit up front, or they need headphones, or they need whatever else you think in order for your child to successfully get from your house to school and from school to home. I'm right now working with a kid who has medical issues that can only be on the bus for half an hour. And it's a lot. Again, having that conversation with the transportation department and finding out if the transportation department, your school district, or the county, depending the age of your child, contracts out with private transporters, because those people have to be involved. And that's really hard, because the school district's transportation department can't tell a bus driver who's hired by a company that they contracted what to do. It needs to come from them. So that's, again, collaboration is so very important. But if it's on the IEP that Johnny needs A, B, C, and D, it's important to be able to share that and to justify it. And sometimes a doctor's note is very important, like an air-conditioned bus, right? A wheelchair bus. I'm giving examples. Transition services. I'm rolling my eyes. When your child starts to turn near the age of 15, like 14, start planning on where that child's going to be, because not all children want to stay till they're 21. They want to graduate with their class, and they can. Many kids can graduate with their class, but what would they need? What is their plan? Many kids might have a plan. They know they want to do A, B, or C. So let's start getting that, and let's involve the kid if possible. If you have a student that was like my daughter, totally dependent, and you know when they turn 21, you want a day program, a day have program for them, you have to start that work as soon as possible, because those programs fill up right away. If your child's going career and tech programs, you want to make sure that they're getting the stuff in school that the school can provide to support their desire to maybe be a vet technician or cosmetology or HAB or HVAC or criminal justice, or all these different things that BOCES programs offer, the career and tech part, fashion design, early education, all these things, so they can get, supported there and take what they can in school to help them with that. Or they might be going to college and they need certain things for that. Or, like I said, a trade school afterwards. All that's important by at least age 15. Is your child going to receive 12-month school services, which is extended school year? We'll talk about that. The projected date of the annual review will be on there. The projected date of a reevaluation, which is called a triennial, every 3 years. The placement of the child. And then this is the one I added, because this is one that is oftentimes neglected. And I think it's one of the most important things, is the special alert section. So most IEPs have that cover IEP where it lists the child's name, all the pertinent information, parents, address, classification, blah, 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 start date, all that. But they have a section called special alerts. And the reason you want that is because if your child has a special health care plan, special alert. If your child has a specific learning disability, special alert. So if your child is dyslexic, special alert, because that's a specific learning disability. If your child is classified other health impaired, that broad topic, special alert, you put your child's ADHD or child's autistic or your child's this. Those special alerts are really important. If your child does not like to be touched, or your child has sensory concerns or whatever, those are important, because when a teacher looks at that first page, that's the thing that should pop right out. I highlight that, I would highlight that definitely. All right. Yeah, because that was real important. All right, extended school year. This is not summer school, because summer school is for gen ed kids that go to their school. Extended school year is summer services, and it's to provide maintenance of what your child already has and to maintain those abilities. So there needs to be substantial regression, and they consider substantial regression that it takes 8 weeks for your child to relearn everything that they've learned at the end of the school year, June, that it will take them 8 weeks starting in September. So a lot of students, like my daughter, who's multiply disabled, are always afforded extended school year, because, they need the PT, the OT, and all that. Most extended school year services are not exactly what they got on their school year IEP. A summer IEP will be created, and they usually decrease the frequency of related services just for maintenance, okay? Again, the way to document substantial regression, and most chairpersons will say we need a substantial regression statement, is anytime your child's out for whatever reason, if they're sick, the teacher's sick, I know this year, oh my gosh, so many school districts had very long breaks because they didn't have enough snow days. I know up in the North Country, it might not have been the same, but down here, they had really long breaks. And it took so long for the child to get back into the groove after that break. That's a good substantial regression statement. So you want to keep track of that. So we can go to the next thing. And it's 6 weeks during the month of July and August. So these are the disability categories. You don't have, go back one. You don't have private school placement? I don't know why that's not on your page. No, I didn't see it. Nope. Okay, I have it on mine, and I have to check that. I just want to share with you, private school placement. There are many parents that want to place their child in a parochial school. Or another kind of a private school. We have Montessori schools, Waldorf schools, things like that. And you have a right to do that. However, if your child has an IEP with your school district and you want your child to receive those services, and many are the related services, speech, OT, PT, you have a right to send your child to that private school. You have to pay for the tuition. The school district doesn't. However, the school district the school is in. So if that parochial school is not in your school district and then another school district, that school district will take it upon, it's their responsibility to come up with an IESP, Individualized Educational Service Plan. And they will figure out how your child will get those services there. And there are many private schools in the area that I live in that do that very well. And they actually have service providers come to that particular school and provide the services there because there's a number of kids that need it. However, sometimes they can't do that. And it has to be at one of the schools in that district, not your district you live in, that they have to bus the kid to. Again, that's something to have discussions with beforehand and not wait to the last minute. So I apologize for that. I will see if I can figure out why that slide's not on there. So these are, I just wanted to share this with you. This is from the Department of Ed in 2023. These are the different categories and the number of percentages for kids with IEPs. And they're rounded up, I think. So just an FYI, just wanted you to know. So what if your child's not found eligible? So it's an eligibility meeting. You're right. You had all those evaluations. You're like, I know Johnny needs an IEP. And all these evaluations come back. And according to the law and regulation of New York State, they do not meet IEP eligibility. That doesn't mean your child can't get services. They could be eligible for school level services, building level services, whatever school your child's in. So if it's elementary, middle school, high school, that's the school educational related support services and building level supports that they can. So those could be OT, PT, speech, counseling. We got to remember counseling is another service that kids can get. And that person that you need to speak with, the special education department does not call up the principal and say, oh, we're sending over a kid that needs, extended education related support services now. You need to share that information. Again, paper trail. We had, you will have after the meeting, a letter from the school district deeming your child as ineligible for IEP services, special education services. So you can share that with the building level. It's usually the principal, and say you would really like your child to be considered for educationally related support services. And these are why, because sometimes it's borderline, and and then they handle that. Or, and this is the other part, your child should be referred to the school building administrator who does the 504 plan for that school. And that's, these are things that you can look at later. So that 504 plan is, again, the chairperson for special ed is not the person that's going to call up and say this kid's going to be recommended for that. all the information that you have from that initial IEP meeting, you want to save those evaluations and everything so you can continue if you want a 504. And we'll go to the next page. And those were, we already talked, academic, go back one, Apollo. Academic Intervention Services is called AIS. So that could be additional reading and math and stuff like that. So that's a building level support. So Section 504 of the Rehab Act of 1973 is a consideration for children who do not meet the criteria of IDEA. This states that individuals with disabilities have access to all federally funded programs. It also states that the disability must impact a major life function. Remember that. Seeing, hearing, breathing, thinking, learning, reading, concentration, and communication. So the next, it really does help to have a physician's diagnosis. Is it needed? According to the law, it's not. But I'm going to tell you right now, as an advocate, it's so much better that you have a medical diagnosis written out. The 504 team includes parents and guardians and the student, if appropriate, one person familiar with the student's abilities. If there's a teacher, at least one person that's able to interpret the student's evaluation. So remember all those evaluations that were done for IEP consideration? It's really important that you share that with this 504 committee chairperson, the team, they call it a team, I'm sorry, the 504 team person, because sometimes the left hand doesn't tell the right hand. And I was at a 504 meeting and everyone assumed that the 504 chairperson, the team leader was there, had access to those evaluations that the ineligibility was, and they didn't because it was in the special ed department. So, yeah, and it wasn't accessible, just the computer. So always have that, always share it. At least one, I already said that. One person who knows about the services that are available at that school, which is probably the principal or anybody else at there. And then this is the most important. If your child has medical needs, please, please make sure the school nurse is at the meeting. So important, because sometimes there's that healthcare plan and you always need to have a backup plan. That school nurse is not there. Who's going to do this here? If the school nurse is not going to be there and there's no other nurse, who's going to call the parent up and say, listen, we have nobody to check your child's blood sugar levels. What are we going to do? It's really important that all the T's be crossed and the I's are dotted. The 504 plan is a written statement for a child with a disability under Section 504 that describes program accommodations, modifications, and support so that child can access that education. It should include, like I said, all of that stuff that's listed in there. But the basic components of a 504 is assistive tech, accommodations, and services. And I've had some of the accommodations be that the child, because of sensory things, they leave a classroom earlier to get to the next classroom because they can't handle all that hallway stuff. Books read to them, yeah, redirection, all that other stuff. Extra time on tests, modified assignments, stuff like that can all be done. The plan should, I'm sorry, Suzanne, I apologize. The plan should be reviewed annually. And I put an asterisk there because many plans just carry over to the next year. And in my mind, it makes no sense because it's going to be a new year. And you should review that current plan. Did it work well? You want that student to say, you know what? This really didn't work for me. I think this worked better, even though teachers might be doing it too. You want it written and documented. And the new year is going to start a new environment. You might want to change things up a bit. So I suggest that you make sure you request in writing that you want an annual review. And there's the COPA thing. There's the 504 facts that you can look up yourselves. So IEP 504, I love when people ask me the differences between those things. And I'm like, ooh. So the 504 removes the barriers to learning for a student with disability. The goal is to give the student equal access to that learning. The 504, like I said, includes assistive tech, meaning things like screen readers, noise canceling headphones, speech to soft textware. Many 504s include the accommodations, which are changes in the way things get done. This can include extended time on tests or getting to leave the classroom early. I jumped ahead of Sil. It is most often seen by the building school principal or school psychologist or maybe vice principal. It is a building level program. There is no federal funding for 504s. An IEP allows the student access to direct special education instruction via a special education teacher. An IEP offers more safeguards and is monitored by a multidisciplinary committee that meets yearly. They have to, it's mandated in the laws and regulations to address if the student is meeting his or her goals. Quarterly progress are mandated to be done and mailed to the parents or could be emailed. And the parent is an integral part of the committee. There is federal funding for IEPs. Now, I want to know how many of you are laughing right now. Knowing that the federal government does not give the states the money they're supposed to get, and therefore the states are not able to give the school district the money they're supposed to get, and hence school taxes. But it should never be an issue. Money should never be brought up. But it's important to know that both of these documents are not written in stone and can be modified, reviewed, and discussed when needed. And that is when you just say you want a 504 review or you want an IEP program review. And again, in writing. And the reason why you want it. Just from an aside, I tell parents when you have a new IEP created for the following year, that if they could put on the IEP comments, their minutes section or whatever, that you're requesting for a 6 to 8 week review already set up at the beginning of the school year to just discuss what's going on to see if everything's all right. Because sometimes there are big transitions, like from an elementary to middle or middle to high school, or an in-school program to an out-of-school program, district program. It's important to already give a heads up that you're going to want to review, because chairpersons will make sure that their administrative assistant red flags that. And I love that, because I get an email, what's a good date? And that's a good thing. And you can always say, hey, you know what? Things are going good. We don't need the review. But I don't suggest waiting until the parent-teacher conferences, which is usually in November, because that's not enough time if you want to make changes, and make changes that meaning supports your child needs to happen. You don't want them to you want it done sooner is better than later.
So
I hope
Renée,
that makes sense.
just want to give you a quick time check. You've got 7 minutes.
Yep, I'm looking. Thank you. So the next thing, so I included this because this was a statewide thing. These are state resources. There's a bunch of resources out there, but the Independent Living Centers of New York State, there's 41, and they're funded by the centers are funded by New York State Ed Department and provide services and advocacy for persons with disabilities. They are community-based, run by a majority of people with disabilities, and they focus on peer support, self-help, according to New York State Ed Department. So there's a list here of all the different ILCs, independent living centers across the state of New York. Not all living centers provide the same services. So if you find the center that's located in the county that you live in that covers it, go to their website and find out what they offer. Disabilities Rights of New York, DRNY, is a non-for-profit organization that provides free legal and advocacy services to individuals with disabilities. They do work, and I know they do, tirelessly to protect and advance the rights of children and adults with disabilities. They're committed to enabling the people that we serve to exercise their own life choices. That's very important, and fully participate in community life. That website is over there too. More state resources. I love Parent to Parent in New York State. I actually spoke with a parent many years ago when I had my daughter and just wanted to talk to another parent who had a child who had brain damage at birth and who was big. She was 9 pounds, 22 inches, then fed by a tube. And I just wanted, not to reinvent a wheel and to see what it was like and to get some advice. So you could do that, but they also offer a ton of workshops, webinars that are free, all sorts of different topics and information. Go to Parent. They slew of resources. And then there's Families Together in New York State, another wonderful organization that represents, supports, and advocates for youth and families to have a voice in policymaking and systems change to ensure an equitable and inclusive journey that fosters persons with disabilities to belonging, wellness, and empowerment for all. So that is also included there, their website. And so this is where I work at RCal. And if you're in Ulster County, these are the services that we provide here. I'm not going to go into it all, but this is what we do. And so if you're in Ulster County, go look our website up and you can see that. So this is something I'm sharing with you to suggest that if you do this in your county, I created this important context for Ulster County for people that are when they get this here, that they have a list of the actual contact and websites for the local school districts, as well as the early intervention department in Ulster County. So if somebody near you wants to create this is a great thing to do because it's really helpful for not only parents, but for other professionals that work in that county to have access firsthand instead of getting, 3 phone calls later. And then the last thing, one thing is sure, we have to do something for these kids. We have to do what we know best at the moment. And if it doesn't turn out right, we can modify it as we go along. Communication is the best thing in the world. Being transparent, being respectful, and expecting respect also. Know who your peoples are. That's so important. Know where to find the resources. You don't have to know everything, but you do have to know, hey, where can I find it? I'm going to shut up and ask if there's any and that's my contact information.
We have one question in 2 minutes. Is there a good way to explain when advocating that qualitative data is sufficient and valuable for some cases at the CSC meeting, communication notebook, report card, comments, etc., as opposed to test scores and graphs?
Good way to explain. Yes, because not all so I think the tests, the scores, and the graphs are not showing what your child is capable of doing. That's everybody going to the norm, right? What the general is. But what your child's able to do using this other means of taking data. So keeping like you were talking about, the communication book, the report card, the comments, is actual what's going on at a day-to-day basis. Those test scores are a snippet of a child in that moment your child takes that test. Does that make sense? So I don't know about you, but we all have taken tests. And that day that your child did that could be a day that they weren't feeling good or they were feeling good. All these different things could affect how your child is being evaluated. They don't know the person, especially with evaluations. They don't know the person. They're brand new people. They're not familiar with that situation. So that's why collecting any kind of data is important to present as a justification for certain things you want or don't want on an IEP. Thank you. You're welcome.
So I will say thank you, Renee. We are at 3 o'clock, and if you have questions, Renee's contact information is up and you can contact her directly. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.